Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump announcing a new trade deal after a meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. Details about the agreement on fentanyl, rare earths, and soybean purchases. And the president told the Pentagon to immediately resume testing U.S. nuclear weapons. We have the latest. President Trump says the U.S. will start testing nuclear weapons again. Will this trigger a new nuclear arms race? Another vote on the Senate floor on day 30 of the government shutdown. What this means for food stamps for millions of Americans. Cracking down on illegal aliens with commercial driver's licenses. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem shared an update today on Operation Midway Blitz. Tech giant Cisco facing a human rights lawsuit alleging that it built China's mass surveillance system. Two lawmakers urging the Trump administration to act. We bring you their message.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. President Trump on his way back to Washington after a week of diplomacy and deals in Asia. The president ended his tour in South Korea with a high-stakes meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. Leaving that meeting, Trump said China will buy what he called tremendous amounts of American soybean. He said he will reduce fentanyl-linked tariffs on China while Beijing paused its planned rare earth export controls. NTD's Washington correspondent brings us more from that meeting from Gyeongju, South Korea.
It's going to be very strong in enforcing the fentanyl, everything having to do with fentanyl and regulations internally, including taking very strong measures against those that don't obey.
President Trump is rolling back fentanyl-related tariffs on China as he leaves his first face-to-face meeting in 6 years with CCP leader Xi Jinping.
It was 57, now it's 47. Because I believe they are really taking strong action.
Effective immediately, the 20% U.S. tariff on Chinese imports imposed due to Beijing's failure to curb exports of fentanyl ingredients is now reduced to 10%. And on talking China into buying more U.S. agriculture.
Large amounts, tremendous amounts of the soybeans and other farm products are going to be purchased immediately, starting immediately.
President Trump saying that Xi authorized China to start buying U.S. soybeans just before their meeting.
Which I appreciate it. That was a very nice gesture.
Meanwhile, President Trump declares the dispute with China over rare earths settled.
But all of the rare earth has been settled, and that's for the world. I guess you could really say this was a worldwide situation, not just a U.S. situation.
China, which has a near monopoly on rare earths, elements that play vital roles in cars, planes, and weapons, ramped up their export restrictions on these critical minerals earlier this month. In response, President Trump signed a flurry of deals with Indo-Pacific countries, including Japan, Malaysia, and Australia, to counter Beijing's market dominance. But after his meeting with Xi,
well, there's no roadblock at all on rare earth. That will hopefully disappear from our vocabulary for a little while.
The president says that this is part of a one-year agreement that will be negotiated every year. And minutes before his meeting with the Chinese regime leader, President Trump announces that he's directed the Department of War to immediately start testing the United States nuclear weapons on a, quote, equal basis with other countries, specifically citing China and Russia.
They seem to all be nuclear testing. We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. We've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also.
President Trump also announces that China will begin to purchase American energy, even teasing what he calls a very large-scale transaction of oil and gas from Alaska. He also says that he has plans to visit China in April, after which Xi Jinping will come to visit the U.S. Reporting from Gyeongju, South Korea, Mario Tsu, NTD News.
China's Commerce Ministry confirmed today the regime will suspend its new export control restrictions on rare earth minerals for 1 year. It also said the U.S. will pause its investigation into China's shipbuilding and maritime industries for 1 year. And during an interview on Fox Business this morning, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the U.S. and China could sign a trade agreement as soon as next week. He also said the U.S. would enact a 1-year suspension of certain entity list restrictions. Those restrictions would make it harder for Chinese firms to use affiliates to buy off-limits technology. Besson added that China has agreed to purchase millions of metric tons of U.S. soybeans in the coming years. Here's the secretary.
Is the U.S. suspending that new rule that was put in place that would have expanded the entity list? Export restrictions to any entity that is at least 50% owned by one or more entities on the list for 1 year?
Yes, we are going to be suspending that for a year in return for the suspension on the rare earth licensing regime. And Maria, what's important to note here, that it was China versus the world. China threatened to put this licensing regime on the entire world, and President Trump, as the leader of the free world, negotiated this deal for everyone. The Kuala Lumpur agreement was finished in the middle of the night last night, so I expect that we will exchange signatures possibly as soon as next week. And Maria, one of the big parts of this agreement, and I'm going to break the news here on your story, is the massive amount of agriculture purchases that the Chinese are going to be doing in this agreement. So the Chinese have agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of soybeans during this season, right now, between now and the should be January. And then for the next 3 years, they're going to be buying a minimum of 25 million metric tons per annum for the next 3 years.
Besson also said China has approved the transfer agreement for TikTok, adding that he expects it to move forward in the coming weeks and months. He did not offer more details. China's Commerce Ministry said it would properly handle TikTok-related issues with the United States. And we have more details regarding Trump's Asia trip. He said Taiwan never came up in talks with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. As for North Korea, Trump said he was unable to meet with its leader Kim Jong-un due to time constraints, but added he is willing to return to the region for a meeting.
We never were able to talk because I was so busy. And really, this is why we came. I think it would have been maybe disrespectful to the importance of this meeting if we did that. So I'd come back. With respect to Kim Jong-un, I'd come back.
2 Republican lawmakers are urging the Trump administration to back Falun Gong practitioners in their Supreme Court lawsuit against Cisco. The tech company is accused of building China's mass surveillance system that tracks and persecutes the group. If the lawsuit is successful, it would signal that American companies can be held liable, in some cases, for abuse of their technologies overseas. Congressman Chris Smith and John Muhlenar wrote to the Trump administration's top Supreme Court litigator. They cited an investigation last month that showed U.S. tech companies, to a large degree, designed and built China's surveillance state. The lawmakers want the Supreme Court to allow the lawsuit to proceed. Falun Gong practitioners argued that Cisco supplied the technology to China, knowing that it would be used to track, detain, and torture believers. The justices have to decide whether an American company can be held liable for aiding and abetting human rights abuses. Cisco has argued that the case should be dismissed because it involves U.S. foreign relations. The Solicitor General under President Trump is expected to file a brief later this year or early next year. President Trump announced a series of trade deals after a meeting with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Joining us to discuss is Chris Chappell, host of the show China Uncensored. Chris, so good to have you here. Thank you very much. So what are your overall thoughts, impressions on the meeting? You know, Trump saying it was amazing, saying that that's the way we should get along.
I mean, he has a way with words. To me, not a whole lot really came out of the meeting that was very significant. It was basically kind of a Rorschach test for however you feel about Xi Jinping or Trump. People who hate Trump say he caved. It was another taco moment. People who don't like Xi Jinping say that, he's losing power, which, I mean, since people were saying he'd be purged last week at the 4th plenum, I think this is pretty clear that he's still around. To me, what was most significant was actually the lead up to the meeting, everything Trump did on his Asia tour. And all of that was definitely geared towards countering the CCP. And I think there's a lot more weight to that than really most of the stuff that actually came out of the meeting itself.
So then what do you think Trump achieved in the meetings leading up to the summit with Xi Jinping?
Well, so the trade deals with Cambodia and Malaysia, that was really big. The rare earths deal with Japan, and that's going to be critical for breaking China's monopoly on rare earths. The agreement with South Korea to let them build nuclear submarines, really important. The help that those countries are going to give to getting U.S. shipbuilding back on its feet. Most ships are built in China now. I think it has 200 times the shipbuilding capacity of the United States. The U.S. really rapidly needs to ramp up its shipbuilding, and our allies in South Korea and Japan can really play a big role in that. And, of course, Trump's announcement right before the meeting that the U.S. would be once again testing nuclear weapons. I think that sent a pretty clear message to Xi Jinping.
All right, Chris, I want to get into a little bit detail of some of the things that came out of this meeting. So Beijing agreed to resume purchasing soybeans from American farmers, allow for the export of rare earth metals, and mitigate the flow of fentanyl precursors. So Trump said that Xi is going to work very hard to stop the death that's coming in. But Chris, my question to you is, we've seen many past instances where China did not live up to its agreements.
Yeah, China has been promising to curb fentanyl flowing into the U.S. since Obama. They lie every time. And my concern is that, do we really need to roll back the tariffs 10% for that? I mean, that's getting close to the same tariff rates the U.S. has on other countries. China should be treated differently. The Chinese Communist Party is a threat to the United States. Why get rid of those tariffs for something they are not going to do? Maybe Trump has a reason behind that, but yeah, the main thing was that the 100% tariffs that Trump put on China in response to the rare earth restrictions that China implemented, those have been walked back. So we're basically back to where we were 3 weeks ago.
Why do you think President Trump omitted the Taiwan issue? It never came up during the talks, despite Trump previously saying that he would raise it.
Yeah, he also said he would bring up Jimmy Lai. I don't know why that was the decision. It just kind of fits into the meeting not really being significant in any way. I think both sides just took a step back to allow for re-strategizing. What'll be really significant is what happens in the future. Will the U.S. use this supposed year-long gap before China could re-implement the rare earth restrictions to actually work with Japan and develop rare earths so the U.S. is not reliant on Chinese rare earths? That's going to be very significant. And the tariff stuff, next week, tariffs could be slapped back on. Who knows?
So, Chris, I don't know if I want to admit this, but I watch a lot of your episodes, and I do know that you you do talk a lot about U.S.-China relations. So I think this question will be appropriate. Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping said that China and the United States should be partners and friends. What does that mean to you? What is the current state of U.S.-China relations?
I mean, the joke is Xi Jinping always talks about win-win cooperation, which means China wins twice. It's meaningless. The Chinese Communist Party has, well before Xi Jinping, considered itself at war with the United States. That's not changing. Fundamental to China's communist system is the idea that it has to supplant the U.S. as a global superpower. They're out to defeat us. So, he can say those nice words. And Trump says nice words about Xi Jinping. I think it's both equally meaningless. Again, we're going to have to see what actually both sides do in the coming weeks and months.
So, Chris, I was doing a little bit of research about this meeting, and according to China's foreign ministry, Xi Jinping said that China has no intention to challenge or supplant anyone. Can you talk to us about that?
I mean, certainly the Chinese Communist Party has no history of lying, so I guess we can take them at their word. I think things are great now. Great.
Would you like to elaborate a bit further?
Well, if anyone didn't pick up on the sarcasm, yeah, it's they say anything. It's like fentanyl. They say they're going to do something, they don't. There is no way that China doesn't interfere with the United States. If we want to make America great again, the Chinese Communist Party has to be dealt with.
Okay, do you think China still holds the cards to try to become the world's leader, given the state of its economy right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Internally, there are many economic problems facing the Chinese Communist Party. The 100% tariffs would have been very devastating to them. Overproduction, collapsing real estate market. It's really hard to say if they can hold it together. Then again, people have been saying that for a long time, and the Chinese Communist Party has always managed to plug the sinking ship somehow. And then, of course, the future of Taiwan is sort of the specter hanging over all of this, just how far Xi Jinping will go with that. But the military seems to be in disarray right now with all the purges. So I'm hoping that means a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan has been delayed for some good time.
Okay, Chris, let me just ask you one more question here. What is the U.S. doing to counter China's plans to become the world leader?
Well, again, we're going to have to see specifically what the Trump administration does moving forward. Like I said, are they actually going to work to break the rare earth stranglehold? That's a big lever. That's leverage China has over the United States. I think in the future, we need to keep clamping down on U.S. business with China. AP just came out with an article revealing that the U.S. government for years helped connect American companies with Chinese security companies. So there's a lot of messy things going on that we basically need to head towards decoupling with China. Otherwise, we're going to be selling them the rope that they'll use to hang us.
Well, all right, Chris, you always make the conversation really fun and really appreciate that sarcasm earlier. Thank you very much for your time today.
No, my pleasure.
President Trump says the U.S. will start testing nuclear weapons again. Will this trigger a new nuclear arms race? We have a discussion after this break.
Don't wait. Call now to find out about our Medicare plan.
Why do we have to sit through so many Medicare commercials this time of year? It's endless.
Good question, Edith. I'm glad you asked. We see so many commercials this time of year because it's the only time, other than special circumstances, when Medicare recipients can change their plan for Part C. Original Medicare only covers Parts A and B, but a Medicare Advantage plan has additional benefits that Original Medicare doesn't offer.
So now's the time to fill those spaces?
That's right, Archie. And every year, there are changes to what benefits you may receive from your Part C plan. Call right now to find out what plan best suits your needs.
It's easy, easy, don't delay. Pick up the phone and call today.
Call now for your free Medicare review.
1-833-469-1754. 1-833-469-1754.
You may now return to your regularly scheduled programming.
Divinely inspired traditional oil painting inspires compassion. Artwork created in truth and beauty illuminates a path to goodness. Rediscover traditional art, revive classical culture. We warmly invite oil painters from around the world to participate in the 7th NTD International Figure Painting Competition, a celebration of classical realism. Please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains.
President Trump's nominee for Surgeon General, Dr. Casey Means, was set to face her Senate confirmation hearing today, but Means went into labor with her first child. She will now appear before the Senate Health Committee chaired by Republican Senator Bill Cassidy at a later date. Means is a Stanford-trained physician. She left surgical residency to pursue holistic and functional medicine. She later joined Levels. This is a company promoting metabolic health monitoring. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. praises her as a reformer. If confirmed, Means would lead the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps and serve as well as the nation's top medical voice. President Trump is directing the Pentagon to start testing nuclear weapons. Joining us to discuss is Rick Fisher, Senior Fellow on Asian Military Affairs at the International Assessment and Strategic Center. Good afternoon, Rick. Is this a nuclear escalation where Trump is saying that he is increasing or actually restarting nuclear testing in response to other nations' nuclear testing? Is this different, or does it have parallels to what happened during the Cold War, where the U.S. and the Soviet Union used nuclear tests for deterrence?
President Trump apparently has assessed that other countries are also conducting some level of nuclear testing. That is what he expressed in his announcement a short time before he met with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. And his decision is probably based in a lot of context around the timing. President Trump, in his first term, tried mightily to convince both Russia and China to engage in the beginning of discussions that he hoped would lead to a cap on the nuclear arms race. Russia and China have consistently refused, utterly refused, to engage in any kind of nuclear control, nuclear limitation dialogue. And I think that President Trump's decision to resume nuclear testing to better assure the reliability of the American nuclear stockpile is his way to try to signal both Russia and China that this dialogue is preferable to a resumption of a nuclear arms race. But China and Russia are both building up their nuclear arsenals, both at a theater level and at a strategic level. So it is like before, when President Trump decided to leave the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, he is preparing to lead the unilateral moratorium that the United States has followed on nuclear testing to prove to Russia and China that if they want a nuclear arms race, the United States is prepared to follow suit.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned the reliability aspect of all this. How reliable is the nuclear stockpile right now?
Well, there have been doubts expressed about the reliability of the entire nuclear stockpile. There are some warheads in the stockpile that are very old. Others contend that advanced supercomputing-based testing is sufficient, but ultimately you just don't know unless you've actually done a test. Now, will the United States be resuming tests of full warheads? That's not clear. Will it simply be conducting tests of components of nuclear weapons? Again, not clear. But the timing of President Trump's announcement is part and parcel of his longstanding attempt to try to convince Russia and China to engage in real nuclear reductions. He's clearly frustrated with their refusals and believes that the United States, as a consequence, may not have any choice but to attend to our nuclear modernization plans and to ensure our nuclear deterrent capability by ensuring the reliability of those weapons, which could include some form of testing.
How do our adversaries feel about the U.S.'s nuclear capabilities?
Well, China and Russia don't brag about the possibility that they may be cooperating with their offensive nuclear weapons, but they are willing to talk about, at times, about the degree to which they cooperate in defensive strategic activities. And it's this cooperation in defensive strategic activities that warns many, including myself, that they may be also cooperating in offensive strategic activities. So the United States, in a sense, in my opinion at least, has had a long-standing justification, not just to expand its nuclear arsenal, but also to resume testing to assure the reliability of that nuclear arsenal, both to assure our own people and to assure our allies that if China and Russia undertake nuclear aggression, that they will suffer guaranteed retaliation with weapons that actually work.
So, Rick, how fast would you say is China's advancement in its nuclear capabilities and arsenal? Because President Trump says Russia is second and China is a distant third, but will be even within 5 years.
Well, that assessment of being even in 5 years exceeds recent Pentagon assessments by another 5 years. So if President Trump is convinced that China is going to have as many deployed nuclear weapons as the United States in 5 years, that is a very rapid acceleration of China's nuclear arsenal. And we don't know whether China will be satisfied with parity, nuclear parity with the United States and perhaps Russia. By previous conduct, China wants superiority in everything, and I would also be very concerned that China is actually building toward a position of nuclear superiority against the United States.
So you said earlier that President Trump talked to these countries about reducing their nuclear weapons. The fact that President Trump has now announced that the U.S. is going to start testing nuclear weapons, does that mean there's no path towards denuclearization anymore between all these countries? What is your assessment?
Quite the opposite, Don. The Chinese and the Russians could pick up a phone call and initiate or convey their desire to begin these discussions at any time. The United States has reached out on many occasions, and really most recently, I believe, within the last 24 hours, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has refused to consider the idea that it would enter into negotiations that would limit its nuclear weapons. It simply doesn't want to. It wants nuclear superiority, in my assessment, first and foremost, to be able to coerce the United States from defending its allies and partners, especially the democracy on Taiwan. And to his credit, President Trump wants a robust American nuclear posture while pursuing both a national missile defense policy to make sure that Americans don't suffer from a nuclear attack, and holding out the hand of negotiations. President Trump is pursuing a practical, multifaceted approach to this terrific challenge.
Right, Rick, good to speak with you today, and sorry for my being a little bit under the weather. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
Now, Vice President J.D. Vance and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy are speaking in front of the White House. Let's take a look.
File out here, but what we just did was a little roundtable with leaders in the aviation industry. We've got leaders of labor represented. We've got leaders of the businesses that are, of course, making the airline industry run. And I just wanted to hear from people about the stresses of the aviation industry in light of the fact of the shutdown. And here's what I found out. It actually worries me a great deal, because I think that as much as delays have gotten worse over the last couple of weeks, Everybody here is very worried that we're going to see more delays, more stresses on the people who are actually making the aviation system run, and more problems for both the consumers but also the great workers who actually make this incredible shining jewel of the American economy actually work and work on time and work safely. Here are the things that I worry about. I worry about the people who are scanning our bags and making us get through the security line. I worry they're not getting paychecks. They're starting to get worried about how to feed their families and how to pay school tuition and everything else. I worry about the pilots who haven't gotten paid in a long time. I worry about the air traffic controllers who, of course, make this entire system extra safe. I worry about them, more worried about their credit card bill than they should be because they're not getting a paycheck because Democrats refuse to open the government. Now, I understand that a lot of Americans are sick of partisanship in Washington, D.C. Trust me, I've been here for 9 months in this job. I am sick of partisanship in Washington, D.C. But this is very, very simple. Every partisan dispute, every policy disagreement, all of these things we can talk about, we can reason through, we can disagree, we can shake hands and compromise on some of those issues, hopefully. But this is something that every single American, Democrat or Republican or Independent, should be able to agree on. Open the government. Stop this craziness and open the government. It's causing way too many problems, and some of the folks behind me are the people who are dealing with the problems. Now, let's just recap exactly what's happened politically in this town related to the government shutdown. We have had now multiple votes to reopen the United States government. The House of Representatives has voted affirmatively to reopen the United States government. 52 Republicans and 3 Democrats consistently vote to reopen the United States government, but we need 60 votes. So all we need to end the craziness, to pay the air traffic controllers, to pay the TSA agents, to pay the pilots, to make sure that food stamp benefits continue to go out to the American people who need them, all we need is 5 reasonable Democrats to join 3 moderate Democrats and 52 Republicans to reopen the government. I want to let Sean Duffy say something, but before I do, I just want to say to any Democrat in the United States Senate, we are happy to talk about any policy issue. We're happy to talk about health care policy. We're happy to talk about tax policy. We're happy to talk about regulatory policy, but not at the point of a gun. You do not get to take the American people's government hostage and then demand that we give you everything you want in order to pay our air traffic controllers. It's a ridiculous set of demands. Let's reopen the government, and then let's sit down and talk about how to compromise on policy for the American people. Sean?
Appreciate it, Mr. Vice President. So first, I want to thank you for calling this meeting of the aviation industry. We have a great coalition, bipartisan coalition, and so thank you for that. I just want to tell you, we look at the aviation system, and we've seen blips and blurbs, whether it's LAX or it's Atlanta or it's Dallas. You're seeing impacts of this shutdown on our airspace, and that means travelers are delayed, travelers are canceled. It has real problems. So our air traffic controllers, their first paycheck they missed, well, they got 90%, 80% of the paycheck. That was in early October. They just missed their full paycheck. And you got to think, well, then the second paycheck comes. That's not when we have real disruption. Because every single day, as all of you people know, as we all pay our bills, right, it's not just the mortgage and the car payment, which is very real, but they're buying food. They travel 30, 45 minutes into the towers or the centers, so you have to buy gas. They have kids that want to play football or volleyball or tennis, and they can't afford the very life expenses that they need those paychecks for. And so though we've maintained the safety, I'm grateful for our controllers who are coming in every day. But I do think as this shutdown continues, you're going to see more pressure on controllers, more pressure on TSA workers, and that's going to have real impact. One group that we don't talk about a lot is we have technicians that work in our centers. I've talked to you all about how old our equipment is. We have technicians that come in every single day to make sure this equipment actually works. They too aren't getting paid. And this is burning, and it's having a real impact on our men and women who serve our airspace. And so I would join the Vice President and say, don't hold us hostage. Don't hold American families' travel hostage. Don't hold air traffic controllers hostage. Open up the government, have a conversation, let's get it resolved. But again, every day it gets harder. Every day there's going to be more challenges. And the last point I'll make before I turn it over to Sean O'Brien's really great hair day today is the fact that a lot of our people can go through the miss of one paycheck, and it's hard for them, but a lot of them can get through it. None of them can get through 2 paychecks. And so, again, if Democrats don't get their act together very quickly, you're going to see huge problems. And again, I would come to them with a clean heart and say, open up the government, and then let's have a conversation. I'll give it to the Teamster, Sean O'Brien.
Thank you very much, Secretary Duffy. Thank you, Vice President Vance. Look, the bottom line, and we took a position, I represent 1.3 million working men and women in this country for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. We took a position 3 weeks ago. Pass a clean CR, get to the table, negotiate a deal. Do not put working people in the middle of a problem they should not be in there. And we got to think about the families that are going to be affected. Think about when you have to tell your son or daughter they can't play sports because you're not getting paid. Think about when you can't pay your mortgage. Think about when you can't pay your tuition. Put the politics aside, get to the table, negotiate a deal, pass a clean CR right now, and then figure out the problems moving forward. And I want to thank the air traffic controllers. I want to thank the Aviation Administration for all their hard work and sacrifice they make. And look, security and safety of the airlines is paramount. Let's not compromise the safety and security. Pass a clean CR. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Great. Anybody else? Come on. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Secretary Duffy. Thank you all for being here with us today. And I want to start by really thanking the professionals, the air traffic controllers, the folks at the TSA, also the FAA, the people in management. They're working hard. They are keeping the skies safe. They've minimized delays. Fewer than 2% of flights have been delayed so far because of air traffic control shortages. So they've done a great job. But it's putting stress on people. It's not fair to those people. It's also putting stress on the economy. You know, the first couple of weeks this had no impact on the economy, but as every day goes by, the impacts start to grow. And airlines are a pretty good real-time indicator of the economy, and we start to see still minor, but steep booking impact, and you see that happening in the economy. We put the whole economy at risk. And so it's been 30 days, and while I don't have a position on which partisan side and how things should be settled with healthcare, it has been 30 days. I also think it is time to pass a clean CR, use that as the opportunity to get into a room behind closed doors and negotiate hard on the real and substantive issues that the American people want our politicians on both sides of the aisle to solve. But let's get a clean CR and get that negotiation done behind closed doors without the pressure and without putting the American workers and the American economy at risk.
Here. Great. Okay, guys, we'll take a few questions. Yeah. Go ahead. No, I don't think Americans should be afraid to fly because we've got great airline professionals who are keeping the safest aviation industry in the world afloat, but they're doing it with incredible stress. What I worry more about is that if you have, let's say, a pilot who's now missed 2 paychecks, who's now telling his kids that they can't do things that they'd like to do, who's now worried about feeding his family, maybe that guy doesn't show up to work. Maybe he goes and gets a different job. That means greater delays for the American people. I worry about the air traffic controller who now has missed 2 paychecks, who's got to pay his credit card bill or his mortgage, but can't pay both and decides, you know what, this industry is not for me. The Secretary of Transportation made a great point in private. I'm going to steal it right now because we got to get people into the air traffic control industry. We had a shortage of 2,000 people. How many of those people look to the future, see that congressional Democrats can't get their act together and say, you know what, we're not going to join air traffic controlling at all, which is going to further extend the delays. I think that we have a safe system because these guys are doing heroic things in the midst of this terrible shutdown. But why do we ask them to do so much without getting paid? Why don't we pay them so that they can be happy, they can do the best job they can do, and they're not worried about feeding their families while they're doing a very important job for all of us? Yeah.
Could you let us know your understanding of the president's comments that he wants to resume nuclear testing after more than 30 years? Does he mean the warheads themselves, the distribution, the missiles, and so forth? What's your understanding of his intention?
Well, look, I'll answer that very briefly, but I really do want to focus on the shutdown that is affecting the American people. I think the president's truth speaks for itself. We have a big arsenal, obviously. The Russians have a large nuclear arsenal. The Chinese have a large nuclear arsenal. Sometimes you've got to test it to make sure that it's functioning and working properly. We've been working very closely, even with nations that we don't have the best relations with, to try to limit nuclear proliferation. The president's going to keep on working on that, but it's an important part of American national security to make sure that this nuclear arsenal we have actually functions properly, and that's part of a testing regime. To be clear, we know that it does work properly, but you got to keep on top of it over time, and the president just wants to make sure that we do that. Yeah. So I'm not going to answer. I've answered all the questions about nuclear testing that I'm going to answer. I want to talk about the government shutdown here, and I'd like to focus the questions there. But to your point, look, I've never said we're not going to talk to congressional Democrats until they reopen the government. What I've said is we are not going to give in on policy demands under the threat of hostage taking. I mean, if any moderate Democrat or any Democrat period from the United States Senate wants to come over, they're welcome to walk into these doors in an hour. I'm happy to talk to them about how to end the government shutdown, but it's actually very simple because there's a clean CR, as you heard from everybody, that would reopen the government. What we're also saying is that we're not going to allow anybody, Democrat or Republican, to effectively threaten any policy demand and to place that upon reopening the government. You don't reward hostage taking. If Democrats want to talk about health care policy, let's talk about health care policy. If they want to talk about tax policy, let's talk about tax policy. They don't get to come in here and say, you give us everything we want, or we're going to shut down the government and not pay our pilots and not pay our air traffic controllers. It's ridiculous, disgraceful, irresponsible behavior. There have got to be 5 more moderate Democrats in this entire city who are willing to work with us to reopen the government.
Mr. Vice President, on the issue of the shutdown, there is the concern about 42 million people losing their SNAP benefits.
Of course.
Over this weekend. The administration's moved a lot of money around to pay troops, to pay federal law enforcement, and is telling Congress it can't move money around to pay at least some of those benefits. Why not? Would there be some push perhaps in the next 48 hours to try to do that so Americans don't go hungry?
Well, here's the problem. If you go back to previous government shutdowns, what has happened is that sometimes the president has tried to make the shutdown as painful as possible on the American people. I give the president of the United States great credit and the entire team for trying to make this as painless as possible. The Democrats are acting irresponsibly. He doesn't want the American people to suffer because of it. But look, right now, this government, this administration, we're like guys running around, with a leak in a damn wall, trying to plug it with bubble gum. And we plug one spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum. Why don't the Democrats just stop this entire charade and reopen the government so that we don't have to try to make this thing work on a shoestring budget, which is what we're trying to do. The unfortunate reality, and we're starting to see this with our aviation industry, we're going to find out the hard way with SNAP benefits. The American people are already suffering, and the suffering is going to get a lot worse. Not because the President of the United States has failed to make the shutdown painless. He's tried to do everything that he can to make it as unpainless as possible. The reason that pain is coming and the reason it's building is because we're not passing the clean bill to reopen the government. It's a very easy thing to do.
On the government shutdown, of course, we're approaching Thanksgiving, we're approaching the holidays. What could travel look like, if the Democrats don't open the government in time?
So I'm going to let our great Secretary of Transportation answer this question. Look, it could be a disaster. It really could be, because at that point you're talking about people have missed 3 paychecks. They've missed 4 paychecks. How many of them are not going to show up for work? You take the TSA lines that are already too long, even right now, and say half of those people don't show up for work, not because they're not hard workers or good people, but because they've got to find a different job to feed their families. What happens when the security lines are not an hour long, but they're 4 hours long? What happens when pilots start not showing up for work because they're so focused on paying the bills, they can't fly the plane safely? That's going to lead to massive delays. We want people to be able to get home for Thanksgiving. We want people to be able to travel for business, to make this entire engine of commerce work. We want the aviation industry to work. It's not going to work unless the Democrats reopen the government. These guys are doing heroic things to make it work as well as it possibly can, but every single person that I talk to a word, they are worried that the delays are going to reach a point where it makes it very, very hard for the American people to fly. Sean?
To answer your question, our traffic will be snarled, right? It'll be a disaster in aviation. And just, I'm going to steal, you stole my point, I'll steal one from Scott Kirby from United. October is a slower air travel month, and we have great weather in October. And so you've seen minimal disruption because of good weather and slower travel. But as we go into November, travel picks up as people start to look at going to see their families. Kids come home from college. And if you don't have air traffic controllers who are being paid, they may want to stay on the job, but they cannot. they're going to have to go take a second job, and you're going to have mass issues throughout the airspace. People will not be able to go from one place to the other because of the government shutdown, and I hope Democrats don't take it to that point.
Great. Yeah.
Alex Brachet from ABC News. I'm curious, as we move into this holiday travel season, is the administration working on a plan to keep airports running smoothly? The other thing that I wanted to ask you is we've got 20 million Americans who are set to see their health care premiums skyrocket with those ACA tax credits expiring. Curious your response there. Is the administration working on a plan to expand them?
Well, why don't you take the question about what we're trying to do to try to limit the effects of the shutdown on aviation? I think Sean is a great person to address that, and then I'll address the health insurance premium question.
Yeah, so we're working closely with NATCA, our air traffic controllers union, our technicians who work to keep the equipment safe and operational. I know Christy's working with TSA, so we are doing all we can to partner with and talk to our government employees who make this system run smoothly. But we can only ask so much. And I, as a guy who had a lot of kids and didn't make a lot of money early in my life, I know the pressure that these families are under. And by the way, think when these families go home, the fights that are had over the fact that you don't have money for basketball this season. The family strife that happens because they don't have money coming in the door is very, very real. So we are doing all we can to work with our partners to keep things running smoothly. But in the end, we can only go so far. And if I could just, before I turn it over, I love that you guys are asking us questions about what we can do to make this less painful. There's an easy, painless solution. Pass a clean CR. And by the way, I think you all, I mean, I was part of some shutdowns myself in Congress, and the tone of the press corps is very, very different in this one. You were rabid against Republicans who voted not to open the government up, and it seems like everyone is so docile. And so, like, what is the president going to do to alleviate the pain? I'm out of the mall. Anyone can go see the World War II Museum. They can all go see the Vietnam Memorial. Again, we didn't close those down. This administration is doing everything they can to alleviate the pain on the American people. Go back to Barack Obama. He did everything he could to shut down parks and memorials across this city. And so, again, it's an easy answer. Go ask the Democrats that question. Say, what are you going to do to make sure that people get SNAP benefits this Saturday? Or they have health care assistance for their Obamacare? What are you going to do? Because we're doing everything we can on our end, but there's not much more we can do because the rules of the road by which we have to play. And so, again, I'm grateful for this team because they care about the American people. I just wonder, do the Democrats care the way we do? And if they do, open it up, sit down, and negotiate.
Here, here. That's a great point. I want to answer the question about health insurance premiums because, look, we don't want the American people's health insurance premiums to go up. We're very worried about this. The president's been talking about this since before we even took office, that we're inheriting a health care system that has suffered some real problems under the Biden administration. Because of that, you're seeing health insurance premiums skyrocket. Now, here is our very simple proposal to the Democrats. Let's sit down and come to a compromise and work it out. And you know what the Democrats' response to that is? Give us everything we want, or we're going to shut down the government and keep it shut down. That is not reasonable behavior. That's not how you do compromise in this town. That is the way that the Democrats have operated. They are trying to take a hostage, and we can't reward that behavior. If we do that, if we say, yes, of course, we'll give you everything that you want if you reopen the government, you know what's going to happen? In 3 months, they're going to come back to the administration, and they're again going to say, we're going to shut down the aviation industry. We're going to deny people SNAP benefits unless you give us exactly what you want. That's how a child behaves. That is not how a responsible governing party behaves in the United States of America. And let me make one final point, and then we'll cut out of this press conference. Look, I've been a little bit unfair, and I want to correct this, because when I say the Democrats have shut down the government, it's actually the far left side of the Democratic Party, because to their great credit, 3 moderate Democrats joined 52 Senate Republicans to vote to reopen the government. We need 5 more reasonable Democrats to put the American people first and reopen the government. That's all that we're asking. Let's talk about health care policy. Let's make sure that we ensure that Americans' health insurance premiums don't go up. We want that, and we're willing to work with people for it, but they've got to reopen the government first. Sean came from a background not that dissimilar from mine. Sean O'Brien came from a background not that dissimilar from mine. There are moms and dads who are fighting right now because they're worried about not being able to pay the credit card bill and the mortgage bill. There are parents who have to look their kids in the eye and say, you know what, we're not going to do football this year. We're not going to do basketball this year because I can't pay for it because the federal government is shut down and I'm not getting a paycheck. Do we want those people who keep the aviation system running to not be able to feed their families, to not be able to pay for some of the things that make life worth living? The answer to that question is absolutely, we want them to be able to afford a good life. The only way for that to happen is to reopen the government. It'll be good for those who fly. It'll be good for those who work in the aviation industry. It'll be good for the whole country. Just do the common sense thing, Democrats. Reopen the government. We need 5 Senate Democrats to join us. I hope that they will. Thank you, guys.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and others holding a press conference at the White House, saying that Democrats have closed down the government and they need 5 more Democrats to vote in favor with Republicans to reopen the government, saying that they can have negotiations, but not at gunpoint. Republicans will talk to Democrats once the government is reopened. All right, moving on. New York Governor Kathy Hochul has declared a state of emergency as federal funding for SNAP benefits run out. The state will issue $65 million in assistance to food banks amid the ongoing government shutdown. Hochul made the announcement during a news conference this morning.
Today, I'm officially declaring an emergency. This is a food emergency, and I want to unleash every tool at our disposal to keep New Yorkers from going hungry.
New York State receives nearly $650 million in federal funding for SNAP benefits each month. Oregon and Virginia have also issued emergency declarations to free up funds for emergency food assistance. Yesterday, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek pledged $5 million to food banks and declared a 60-day food security emergency. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin has said the state will draw on surplus funds to pay for up to a month of SNAP benefits. President Trump's meeting with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping is being billed as a breakthrough, but the details suggest more of a temporary truce than a long-term fix. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us. Jack, good afternoon. What are the key takeaways from this summit?
Good afternoon, Don. Well, here's the leaders of the 2 largest economies appearing to pull back from the edge of another full-blown trade war like we saw earlier this year. Now, President Trump says that they agreed to trim tariffs on Chinese goods down from 57% to 47%. In exchange, Beijing would cooperate on fentanyl enforcement, resuming U.S. soybean purchases, and declaring rare earth export restrictions, and postponing those. Now, on rare earths, earlier this month, Trump was threatening to raise tariffs on China by 100% extra. That's after China announced its new restrictions on the world for its rare earths. But that seems to have cooled, at least for now. Take a look.
Tremendous amounts of the soybeans and other farm products are going to be purchased immediately, starting immediately. If you notice, President Xi authorized yesterday for China to start, did you know that, right? China to start buying in very large quantities of soybeans and other things. And that roadblock is gone now. There's no roadblock at all on rare earth. That will hopefully disappear from our vocabulary for a little while.
So is that a 1-year pause on the policy they announced?
It's a 1-year agreement, and we'll extend it after a year.
Now, Trump's calling this a 1-year deal that can be extended, but it's not guaranteed, as China has a track record of failing to keep promises, including under the Phase 1 trade deal of Trump's first term. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that this deal, however fragile it may be, will be signed as early as next week, with China agreeing to buy 25 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans annually. Take a look.
Is the U.S. suspending that new rule that was put in place that would have expanded the entity list? Export restrictions to any entity that is at least 50% owned by one or more entities on the list for 1 year?
Yes, we are going to be suspending that for a year in return for the suspension on the rare earth licensing regime. And Maria, what's important to note here, that it was China versus the world. China threatened to put this licensing regime on the entire world, and President Trump, as the leader of the free world, negotiated this deal for everyone. The Kuala Lumpur agreement was finished in the middle of the night last night, so I expect that we will exchange signatures possibly as soon as next week. And Maria, one of the big parts of this agreement, and I'm going to break the news here on your story, is the massive amount of agriculture purchases that the Chinese are going to be doing in this agreement. So the Chinese have agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of soybeans during this season, right now, between now and the should be January. And then for the next 3 years, they're going to be buying a minimum of 25 million metric tons per annum for the next 3 years.
And for American farmers, that could mean some short-term relief, but it remains to be seen how long this will actually last, as the CCP, any deal with them is fragile. And the issue of fentanyl also came up here. Trump says that China will work to stop the flow of its deadly fentanyl into the U.S., and in return, he's cutting fentanyl-related tariffs from 20 to 10%. Take a look.
I think you're going to see some real action taken. I've agreed, as you know, I put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl coming in, which is it's a big tariff. And based on his statements today, I reduced it by 10%, so it's 10% instead of 20%, effective immediately.
Now, fentanyl poisonings kill around tens of thousands of Americans every year. So there's uncertainty whether China will stop the flow of fentanyl, actually, as the CCP is an authoritarian regime which oversees every aspect of its society. That's why we see a fentanyl epidemic in the U.S., but not in China, where the fentanyl is sourced. Don?
So, Jack, Trump also made news on nuclear testing. What do we know about that?
Right. So right before his sit-down with Xi, President Trump ordered that the Pentagon resume nuclear weapons testing for the first time in about 3 decades, just right after the fall of the Soviet Union. He said that the move was because other countries are still testing, though he hopes for eventual denuclearization. Take a look.
They seem to all be nuclear testing. Russia? We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. We've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also. I'd like to see a denuclearization because we have so many, and Russia has so. Russia's second and China's third, and China will catch up within 4 or 5 years. I think de-escalation would be, they would call it denuclearization, would be a tremendous thing. And it's something, we are actually talking to Russia about that, and China would be added to that if we do something.
And minutes ago, President Trump wrapped up his trip landing here in the U.S., his successful trip to South Korea, Japan, and Malaysia, where he says he secured hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. investment. Back to you, Don.
Okay, Jack, thank you. Millions of Americans will start to lose food assistance benefits this weekend. Will the increasing impact of the shutdown pressure enough Democrats to reopen government? Stay with us. We have more news after this break.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music.